So I'd like to share a story, an experience that started for me about a year ago, and I was given a terrific opportunity to design a new course on sustainability and teach it here at the Mason School of Business. Great opportunity, but then I realized pretty quickly also a pretty awesome challenge. How would you go about designing a course like this? There are not a lot of models out there to emulate. Well, you could probably start, if you're going to design a course on sustainability, by telling your business students that while the economy has been soft, actually businesses have been investing more in sustainability. So that would be an important fact to share. You probably want to share with them different frameworks, talk about the various issues related to sustainability and how those are really interdependent. You could share with them data, a lot of data. For example, data about how just the simple math of economic growth times population growth is going to lead to some resource issues that most of us haven't really sort of thought through. You could also talk about reasons for the gap between really what we say we care about in terms of sustainability, talk about the psychological factors, the situational factors that explain why, despite the fact that we say that we care, our behavior suggests something very different. And if you designed a course like that, despite the fact that a lot of that information really is true, that's probably the reaction you would get. And that was sort of my first realization that I had to think differently about this course. Sustainability is one of those topics that's a little esoteric. It's it's really challenging for a lot of us to relate to, and particularly for business students who are thinking about their careers, all of our graduates thinking about their careers, finding the tangible ways that this relates to their lives and their jobs is a challenge. So put that in the backdrop for a second. I want to share with you something else that was going on at the same time, something else that I was thinking about. There's been a lot of discussion, debate about academia, about higher education, the state of higher education, and a lot of criticism. And I think a lot of it is warranted, right? And you could pick different articles to look at. A recent Time study suggests that 90% of adults believe that higher education is in a state of crisis. About 96% of educators agree that as well. So, on the one hand, one of the issues is tuition. Rising tuition has been an issue over the last few years. I want to focus on the other part of the value equation, which is really the value of higher education. And there are a lot of people I'm going to borrow from who have talked about this, Ken Robinson, Dave Kelly, and many others. Most would agree that we're very good at teaching these things, sort of the functional disciplines and linear problem solving. You give students a problem, you give them the data, and they can reach a solution. And of course, we want to work on developing their communication skills. The criticism is that we're not doing enough of this. We're not teaching our students at the same time how to put together all these different pieces of functional information and understand really the interdependent systems. And you need to be able to do that if you're going to define the right problems to solve in the first place. And once you define those problems, the next step really is using your creative thinking skills to identify possible solutions. And really the best solutions are going to come from collaboration. Well, here's really the biggest challenge, I think, which is that you can't get to the stuff on the right if you can't break through this barrier, the willingness for us to embrace ambiguity. And really that means dealing with our fear of failure. Okay, so really this is a talk in part about how to overcome that. So anyway, I was thinking about that, and then there was this third thread going on. I'd been talking to a colleague, Jim Over at the business school, about leadership, and actually he's been driving us to think about how we need to evolve our approach to teaching leadership at the business school. And along the way, we started having a conversation about something called design thinking. Some of you may have heard about this, but let me share with you a little bit about design thinking. This is a framework developed by the D School at Stanford, the design school, with some help from the design firm IDEO. And design thinking at one level is really, it's a process. And the front end of the process is focused on defining problems. So that's the problem definition part of it. And then the back end really is focused on solving problems. And it borrows tools and methods from a lot of different disciplines: design, engineering, the social sciences, and business as well. But even more than sort of this process, really you want to think about it as iteration. And this is where design thinking gets interesting. With design thinking, the idea is that you want to come up with prototypes, possible solutions, get feedback from others about the merits of the solution, find ways to improve. And it's through that iteration that really you're going to end up at really the best solutions. More than a process, though, design thinking really is a mindset, okay? And again, coming from the D school, this is how they depict it. So the design thinking mindset. One is a bias towards action. Bias towards action means you're not afraid of the ambiguity of a complex problem and that you're willing to start to take steps to try to solve the problem. You're not paralyzed by fear. Collaborating across boundaries. A lot of us think we do this well, but really pushing to bring in people with very different perspectives is important, but it's also very threatening because it means you're not the expert and you lose control. And fear of losing control is, I think, a very real fear. So focus on human values. A lot of times when we're solving problems, we rely primarily on our own beliefs and understanding, or we think about what's technically possible. We don't really focus on human values enough. And design thinking encourages us to do that, as well as to be mindful of process. Understand when first you need to define the problem before you start trying to solve it. Prototyping towards a solution means coming up with an idea, and then finally showing, don't telling means taking that idea and sharing it with someone else. And the feedback you get from sharing an initial idea with someone is what's precious, not the idea itself, but the feedback, because then you can make it even better. So then I started to put some things together. I started to realize that maybe I could take this idea, this need for a new course on sustainability, and combine it with design thinking, and create a really interesting course for students that would be relevant. And then I started to realize that maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I teach in a business school. It's not a design school. I teach actually in the marketing department. And what would my colleagues think? And really, to teach design thinking, even though I have some background in new product development, there are a lot of tools I'd have to teach my students that would be new to me. To teach design thinking, you need a studio. Again, this is a business school. We don't have a studio. And I started to come up with all the reasons why I really shouldn't be going down this path. I started to be fearful and also just be concerned about the complexity of the problem in front of me. And that's when it hit me. Maybe I didn't have a design mindset. And if I wanted to teach my students to have a design mindset, that was a problem. I had to confront this. And maybe I had more of what I would refer to as an academic mindset. So what is an academic mindset? And let me set this up by sharing with you, and many of you may not know this, that most of the faculty, when we get our Ph.D., a Ph.D. is really focused on training you to be a great researcher. They don't really teach us how to be great teachers. That's something you're supposed to figure out as you go. And so our mindset is very much influenced by our academic training as researchers. And what exactly is that? And I'm sure I'll be getting feedback on this, so think of this as a prototype. So first of all, bias towards action. With an academic mindset, we tend to want to take different theories, find out how they conflict, and then resolve that, right? So this idea of exploration is not a comfortable one. Collaborating across boundaries. The top ranked journals in my discipline are functional journals. They are not interdisciplinary. The best conferences to go to in terms of the ones to put on your resume are the functional discipline ones. They're not the interdisciplinary ones. It's just not rewarded. Focus on human values. Now, I want to focus on what's being published so that when I submit the article, it is familiar ground to the reviewer, and my chances of getting published are higher. Being mindful of process, we do use the scientific process, but we're also trained in different tools, and we tend to be very tools-oriented. I'm trained as a psychologist, and so I use experiments, and we tend to work with people who use similar tools. Prototype towards a solution. I don't want to look stupid in front of my peers. I'm going to wait until it's baked. I'm going to wait until I have all the data to prove it. I'm going to figure it out on my own or with my co-authors, and when I'm ready to go out and share it with the world and get it published, then I'm going to go tell and sell. All right? So that's when I realized if I was going to design a great course, I needed to really sort of confront my own fears and start to model the behavior that I wanted my students to adopt as well. So back to the title of my talk and what could get you fired. I don't want to tell you how to get fired. One of the tools, though, of design thinking, and it's a great tool, I think, to kind of push your thinking and be more creative, is to think about how you would not solve a problem. It's a great way to sort of push beyond the obvious, come up with a really interesting idea. It might not be the best idea from a feasibility point of view, but it might have a seed of something really interesting. And if you can take that idea and evolve it, you might come up with an idea that is appropriate and novel, right? And so the same idea is that you can take a problem that you have and try to identify your assumptions, challenge those assumptions, maybe in initially ridiculous ways, and then dial those back, again, so you can solve the problem in a creative way that's appropriate to the problem. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the different elements of the course that really were a result of my thinking about the different assumptions that I had and trying to challenge those in constructive ways. So first of all, you teach a class, you assume it's going to be a lecture discussion class. That's what I've done, that's what we do. Instead, I came up with a class where I did have a front end where we did talk about sustainability from a lot of different perspectives. And one of the things that my students did is they adopted a company and a brand, and they went through a framework. This is the Living Principles framework, and I love this framework because it adds the fourth dimension to sustainability, which is culture. And the framework has 21 criteria, and my students went through the process of analyzing these companies and brands and understanding how these different products fared along 21 different dimensions. We then took that as inspiration, fed that into the design thinking process, and then the back end of the course, we used design thinking. Not just brainstorming, but actually prototyping ideas, concepts for products and solutions, sharing those with other people, getting feedback, and iterating. So it ended up being a bit of a hybrid course. Stay focused on business. Makes sense. I'm in the business school. But then I started to think about it. You know, and you have to ask yourself, why do we have business schools? Why do we have businesses? Why do we have an economy? And you start to wonder, well, really, this is all about improving our personal welfare and that of the society today and in the future. And so maybe a good place to start, and it made me really uncomfortable, but I couldn't really get away from it, was here. Let's talk about happiness. Let's step back and understand that while we do have a profit motive, we need to have businesses that are financially sustainable. We also need to understand why we're developing products and services. Again, it was an experiment. I didn't know how students would react. Fortunately, they reacted very positively to that. Hold class in a conventional classroom. So I love this quote, space is the body language of an organization, right? And when you think about the facilities that we have here, we are truly blessed. We have an amazing facility at the Mason School of Business, terrific classrooms. But if what I want to do is get people to adopt a different mindset, and particularly just practically speaking, if I want them to do different things in the classroom, I need to have a different space. And so we got a little bit of money, and the idea was we were going to prototype a design studio, and with a little bit of help over the summer, that's exactly what we did. Now, did it affect students' mindset? Well, one of the things students did was blog. And these are some of the things they said before we started doing design thinking. What you see here is fear of the ambiguous. You see fear of failure. And after a day in the studio and their initial exercise, this is what we started to see. And it's not so much that this is about entertaining the students and making them feel good, although I love doing that when I can. This is about changing their mindset. This is about pulling aside that fear of failure, the fear of ambiguity, and opening up their creative potential to coming up with products and solutions. Gauge student progress with exams. No exams in this class, okay? Now, I'm not just trying to sell the next section of the class. So instead, we had weekly blogs. And you know, I think it was terrific for students to reflect on what they were doing and learning. For me, the benefit was, though, I was getting, and I didn't anticipate this, I was getting feedback every week on the course. And so I could iterate and improve. And that's how I was trying to apply design thinking to what I was doing. Professor evaluates student progress. At the end of the semester, I had to give students a grade. But along the way, we got feedback from other students on the prototypes of products that students were coming up with. And one of the unintended benefits, and I love these sort of unintended benefits, was that students had to give an elevator pitch and sort of in 60 seconds tell other people what their ideas were. And in the course of a couple hours, they were prototyping those pitches, and those pitches got better and better until by the end, they really knew what it was about their idea that was compelling. And that was completely unanticipated, but I think a great outcome. Professor and course evaluated after the course is over. Semester's done, and then I get a score. Instead, we used a design thinking tool. It's basically a feedback grid, and I asked students to give me feedback about the course in real time. Very threatening to do that. Quite honestly, quite candidly, you know, I love getting the evals after because, well, I can, you know, read through it at my own pace, but you don't know how this is going to go. And I got terrific feedback, and a lot of it was very positive, but there were also a lot of sort of great suggestions that students had, and a lot of which I'm going to, you know, try to integrate into the next iteration of the course. So have I adopted a design mindset at this point? I tell you, I don't know. And in fact, I don't even know if that's necessarily the objective or the point. And I don't even know if a design mindset is sort of at the polar opposite of an academic mindset, or what I've referred to as an academic mindset. Or maybe it's possible that we can adopt different mindsets in different situations. So ask me in a year what I think. And along the way, I encourage you to sort of explore this on your own. But what I will tell you is that there are some lessons that I've learned, or maybe another way to put it, some things that I'm going to fear a little less as I move forward as a college professor. So first of all, I'm not going to feel guilty about acknowledging that sometimes I explore academic topics that aren't immediately relevant to the things that I'm teaching and doing research on. You know, I'm going to explore things that I think are interesting that might be relevant in some way, and that's proved to be a benefit so far. Selective experimentation. I have another class I haven't talked about. I need to go back and really start to experiment and make that something I do every semester to try to innovate these classes. Instead of taking sort of a big chance, this is what Peter Sims would refer to as little bets. Take lots of little bets. Seek micro-feedback. Getting more feedback from students in the hallway. Anytime I now get students in my office, I try to get feedback and say, how are things going? I'd much rather get that feedback in real time than when it's too late. Be a learning teacher, essentially is what this is all about. And to do that, you need to trust your students. Not just trust your students to do the work. I can trust my students absolutely to do that work and do it well. But to trust my students to allow me to be human, and sometimes I'm going to fail in front of them, and to know that they support me, and that overall they're going to have a great experience and be beneficiaries of that experimentation. Show and tell, what I'm saying here is a little bit different, and I think you have to be an advocate as well. And final point is I think we all have unique talents that we can bring to the problem of innovating higher education. Personally, I'm very excited about this next phase for us. But I encourage everyone to sort of think about how you can bring your unique talents to the problems that we have, even if they are talents as seemingly unrelated as your passion for power tools. Thank you.